We never find out if Bloodworth is telling the truth here though, because as it turns out, Roy only had a couple of days left to live anyway.
Turns out Roy had an enlarged blood vessel in his brain so big, he's about to burst.
And Bloodworth is also pretty adamant that you can't escape death. So it seems quite possible that this letting death have someone else in your place business is just an unproven theory that he's testing. Otherwise, you'd probably have a bunch of immortal serial killers running around in the world of Final Destination. This is New York, not Haddonfield. It doesn't take long for the boss, Dennis Latman, to be done in by a flying wrench. Sales manager Peter Friedkin decides to take out Molly, hoping to gain her years, but ends up settling for an FBI agent named Block instead. Shortly before Sam finishes him off with a... what is this thing called? We'll just call it a meat skewer.
On May 13th, 2000,
Sam and Molly decide to start a new life together in Paris. But before their flight takes off, a 17-year-old student named Alex Browning has a vision. He sees the plane malfunction and explode, causing him to freak out and demand to be removed from the aircraft. 6 others from his French class are also removed in commotion. Alex's foresight comes true, and Sam and Molly perish in the crash. A piece of the aircraft flies back towards the city and crushes Nathan and several others, completing death's list from the North Bay Bridge collapse. But because 6 of the Mount Abraham High School students and 1 teacher got off the plane that they should have died on, Death must start a new list to clean up these survivors. At this point, you probably have a lot of questions. The previous disasters that I've talked about have been relatively self-contained. So if Sam had never had a vision, and the Presage employees had died on the bridge collapse, would Flight 180 still have needed to crash? Or did Death take Sam's vision into account? Was the plan all along for him to survive the bridge collapse so that he could die on Flight 180? The way that I see it, once your time is up, your time is up. And when that time comes, you may be able to put it off a little bit, but you can't really change history. You can't alter the bigger picture. I'll be able to fully explain what I mean by the end of the video, but for now, think of it like this. If Sam had never had his vision, the Presage employees would have died on the bridge. But Flight 180 was always destined to crash, whether their seats were filled or not. Because Sam and Molly did survive, Death altered its schemes just slightly to put them on Flight 180, which was going to crash anyway. From here, it just gets more and more complicated, because Death's new plans for the Mount Abraham students create a butterfly effect, resulting in new survivors to be added to Death's growing list, as well as other disasters in different parts of the world. One of the coolest things about Hunt a Killer's Blair Witch game is that you receive these boxes of evidence and solve the mystery entirely from home, but you still have that sense of exploration. They do such a good job of building this world that you end up becoming totally immersed in these locations and attached to the characters that you're trying to help. If you love the slow burn, pit in your stomach type of horror, this is the alternate reality game for you. The story unfolds a little bit more with each box, making it a satisfying adventure to take on with a partner, but an equally rewarding endeavor to solve on your own. Just don't come crying to me if the Blair Witch ends up in your nightmares. Actually, on second thought, I do want to know if that happens. There's even an optional spoiler-free online community where you can collaborate with other detectives to try to solve difficult puzzles or share your own theories about the characters in the story. This is your chance. Go to huntakiller.com/CZsWorld and use code CZsWorld for 20% off that first box. Again, code CZsWorld, 20% discount. What else could you really ask for? Alex Browning's best friend, Todd Wagner, is first up on Death's new list. But before Death reaches him, it's likely that he did something to extend the life of a man named Evan Lewis, but we don't really know exactly what. All we know is that Evan was added to a new list that Death would deal with later. In June of 2000, Todd slips on some leaked toilet water in his bathroom, ultimately causing him to accidentally strangle himself on this clothesline. This is the point where I'd say that we have proof that Death is a force of nature, but also a character, a grim reaper trying to outsmart its victims. Because after killing Todd, it cleans up after itself by receding the toilet water to make Todd's death look like a suicide. This was likely to throw off William Bloodworth, who is now giving advice to some of the accident survivors. Death didn't want Bloodworth meddling with its plans. It doesn't work though. Bloodworth is still able to determine the real cause of Todd's death. This tells me that Death is powerful, but not perfect, and Bloodworth's teachings to Flight 180 survivor Clear Rivers would continue to be a problem for Death going forward. The next Flight 180 survivor that Death reaches is Terry Chaney, who was hit by a bus. But this also causes a woman named Kat Jennings, who was on that bus, not to reach the hotel that she was supposed to die at. So now she is added to that second list behind Evan Lewis. Death goes after the teacher that got off Flight 180, Valerie Luton, by blowing up her computer monitor, setting her home on fire, and finally letting her drop a kitchen knife into her own body. Later that night, Alex saves his classmate classmate, Carter Horton, from being hit by a train. So Death skips Carter and moves on to the next in line, Billy Hitchcock, who is killed by a piece of scrap metal that shoots out from under the train. A police officer named Thomas Burke is dispatched to investigate Billy's death, causing him to not be there for a shootout that kills his partner. Since Burke was also supposed to die in the shootout, he is added to Death's second list. The next day, a teacher named Eugene Dix is called in to substitute for Miss Luton's class, causing him to be absent during an attack that took place at the school that he would have otherwise been teaching at. So he too is added to Death's second list. It seems like Death is just letting the second list grow until after it's taken care of the first list. At some points, Nora and Tim Carpenter are also added to the second list, probably as a ripple effect of something that Alex Browning did, something he would not have been able to do if he had died on Flight 180. The next victim is Clear Rivers, but Alex manages to save her, so the target moves to him. 6 months go by before Death makes another attempt. With Clear's warning and Carter's quick action, Alex's life is saved. Death cycles back through the list, so it's once again Carter's turn. He isn't so lucky, and he's struck by a fallen restaurant sign.
The commotion causes Rory Peters, who is nearby, to miss his show at a local theater, which would later collapse, and he would also be added to the second list.
Death makes dozens of attempts going back and forth between Clear and Alex before finally Alex is knocked out of the picture by a falling brick. Clear goes into hiding in a padded room where Death is unable to reach her. This is another reason that I think Death is more of a character making conscious decisions, because if it were simply a set of rules, it wouldn't move on to that second list until Clear was taken care of. But with Clear locked away in isolation, it didn't really matter if Death focused on other things because she was unlikely to save any of the others while she was in there. And if she did come out, Death would have an opportunity to finish her. But before that happens is when I believe the events of Final Destination Spring Break take place. We know this happens around March because that's when spring breaks tend to happen. I think it's in the year 2001 because it seems to be after Flight 180. There's a point where a character sees that her flight is also 180 and her eyes go wide. But it can't be too far into the 21st century. They still have standard definition TVs in the hotels. Carly Hagen and her friends are vacationing at the Hotel Grand Solcan in Cancun, Mexico. Before arriving, she has a premonition of her hotel exploding. When she sees the signs from her dream starting to come true, she urges her friends to go outside with her. Because it's her birthday wish, they do, just in time to see the explosion that would have killed them. Throughout the rest of the vacation, Death comes